What's going on YouTube? Listen up, young elder gang. This is Chief Walking Bird, back at you with another banger. Please make sure you like, subscribe, and share this video, fam. I hope this video get at least 100,000 likes. In the following video, you will find history, definitions, scripture, information, and best of all, what we Americans have been deprived of from the beginning, the truth. Keep in mind, this content used in this video is intended for educational and informational purposes only. We will give you the total truth as we best understand it today. Be sure to hit that like button, young elder gang. Hit that subscribe button if you're new to the channel. Hit that bell and don't forget to check back with us every day for new content. All right, let's get started. It's Christmas time. Are you dreaming of a white Christmas or a black Christmas? The very word evokes a sense of wonder, a time of joy, family, and tradition. Across the globe, from bustling cities to snow-covered villages, the spirit of Christmas weaves its magic, bringing people together in celebration. But have you ever stopped to ponder the origins of this beloved holiday? The twinkling lights, the decorated trees, the jolly figure of Santa Claus. They all have a long and hard history, reaching back centuries and spanning diverse cultures. The story of Christmas is a tapestry woven from ancient Dogon rituals, Roman festivals, and Christian beliefs. It's a tale of how humanity has long sought to find light and hope in the darkest depths of winter, a testament to our enduring need for connection and celebration. Join us as we embark on a journey through time, unraveling the deep dark origins of Christmas and exploring how it evolved into the global phenomenon we know and love today. The word Christmas comes from the Old English phrase Christes Messe, which means Christ's Mass, from the Greek word Christos, which is a translation of the Hebrew word Mashiach, meaning anointed, from the Latin word Missa, which is a celebration of the Eucharist. The word Christmas was first recorded in 1038. The abbreviation Xmas comes from the first letter of the Greek word Christos, which is Chi. The letter X was first used to abbreviate Christ in the mid-1500s. You see, this go back farther than you know. A group of extraterrestrials called the Nomos, those who claim to know the most, came to Earth, Chi pronounced as Ki. These Nomos beings were reptilians. They are the ones who taught a group of ancient Egyptians about the motion of the sun. This group of ancient Egyptians were called the Dogon people, whose mirror tribe is the Hopi. The Dogon are an ethnic group of people in West Africa known for their mask dances, religious traditions, and intricate wooden sculptures. They live in the Bandiagara escarpment in Mali and Burkina Faso, and their population is estimated to be between 400,000 and 800,000. The Hopi are Native Americans who primarily live in northeastern Arizona. The Nomo taught the Dogon and Hopi about the four seasons or solstices. The four solstices are the astronomical events that mark the start of the four seasons, the vernal equinox. Around March 24th, the day and night are of equal length, marking the beginning of spring, the summer solstice. Around June 20th or 21st, this is the longest day of the year, marking the beginning of summer. The autumnal equinox, around September 23rd, the day and night are of equal length, marking the beginning of autumn. The winter solstice, around December 21st or 22, this is the shortest date of the year, marking the beginning of winter. The word solstice comes from the Latin words sol, meaning sun, and sistere, meaning to stand still. The seasons change on these 4 days each year, because of the relationship between the earth and the sun and the tilt of the earth's axis. Astronomically, our planet's seasons change on 4 particular days each year. 2 solstices, one in June and one in December, and 2 equinoxes, one in March and one in September. Christmas, the winter solstice, Easter, the vernal equinox, Halloween, the autumnal equinox, the midsummer or St. John's Eve, the summer solstice. The world holiday most commonly celebrated around the summer solstice is midsummer, often associated with St. John's Eve in many parts of Europe, which incorporates pagan traditions like bonfires and rituals to mark the longest day of the year. This typically falls on June 20th, 21st, or 22nd in the Northern Hemisphere. The church holiday most closely associated with the summer solstice is the Feast of St. John the Baptist, celebrated on June 24th, which is often considered a Christianization of pagan midsummer celebrations and is marked by bonfires and festivities around the time of the solstice. Most of your Christian holidays are old ancient sun worship taught to humans by the Nomos. There are many perspectives on whether the ancient Egyptians were worshiping the sun or not, but we will save that for another tape. Long before modern Christmas, ancient Egyptians looked to the stars and nature cycles. Winter, with its long nights and cold, held particular significance. It was a time of fear and reverence, symbolizing death and dormancy, yet promising renewal. The winter solstice, around December 21st, marked the shortest day and longest night. It was a time to reflect on darkness and anticipate the return of a light and warmth. Ancient gods were believed to walk the earth, and spirits roam freely. Winter solstice celebrations were sacred rituals, expressing gratitude and hope. As the sun reached its lowest point, ancient communities erupted in fire and celebration. Bonfires roared, symbolizing the sun's return and driving away darkness. It was a time for feasting, gathering with loved ones, and sharing stories. Music and dance echoed the cycles of nature and the human heart. Among the many traditions associated with the winter solstice, the use of evergreens held special significance. Evergreens remained vibrantly green, symbolizing the enduring power of life. Ancient peoples believed they possessed magical properties to ward off evil spirits and bring good luck. Evergreen boughs were adorned with candles, fruits, and nuts, symbolizing hope and abundance. The tradition extended beyond Africa and Europe, found in cultures worldwide. We call this day Gift Day in ancient Kemet. On this day, we pass out gifts to the good children. This goes back before the word Christmas even came to be. For ancient Egyptian, the winter solstice was a reminder of life's cyclical nature. Life would triumph over death, bringing growth and abundance. This understanding was deeply ingrained in their beliefs. The solstice marked a time for reflection and renewal. Celebrations aligned with nature's rhythms, finding hope in darkness. As Christianity spread, it encountered solstice traditions. You might not know this, but the Egyptians are the first Christians. The oldest church is in Ethiopia of the East. Keep in mind, they switched the maps around as the Roman took this tradition out of ancient Egypt and set up their own church to gain more followers after 325 AD, the Council of Nicaea. The Council of Nicaea was the first ecumenical council of the Christian church. The church incorporated them into the Christian calendar. Pagan solstice themes of light and hope intertwined with Christmas. They really have the meaning of the word pagan. Wrong. It comes from the Latin word paganus, which meant country dweller or rural person. A country person, someone who don't live in the city, a farmer or yard man. This word, pagan, has been taken out of context to mean people who practice witchcraft, as in witchcraft, or anyone who don't practice or follow Christianity. As the Roman Empire expanded, it influenced the cultural and religious beliefs of the conquered peoples. The Romans encountered the solstice traditions of the Celts, who are Twa and Dogon people, and Germanic tribes, who were Bantu people at the time before Hitler. They assimilated these customs, merging them with their own practices. Dies Natalis Solis Invicti, the birthday of the unconquered sun, was a significant festival. Emperor Aurelian proclaimed this festival in 274 AD, honoring Sol Invictus. The choice of December 25th was symbolic, aligning with the winter solstice. The solstice marked the sun's rebirth, a symbol of hope for the Romans. By aligning Sol Invictus with the solstice, the Romans tapped into existing reverence for the sun's power. The celebration of Dies Natalis Solis Invicti was a grand affair, a testament to Roman power and opulence. Temples dedicated to Sol Invictus were adorned with garlands, candles, and offerings of incense. Chariot races and gladiate. The proximity of Dies Natalis Solis Invicti to the winter solstice created fertile ground for merging pagan and Christian traditions. As Christianity spread, its adherents faced a deeply ingrained cultural celebration coinciding with Christmas. By choosing December 25th for Christmas, the church tapped into existing goodwill, easing pagan conversion. Critics argue it diluted Christian principles, while others see it as Christianity's adaptability. Regardless, this convergence shaped the Christmas we celebrate today. Oriel combats were held in honor of the sun god. For the Roman citizenry, it marked a time for feasting, revelry, and the exchange of gifts. Houses were decorated with greenery, lamps were lit, and tables groaned under elaborate meals. Wine flowed freely, music filled the air, and the streets echoed with laughter and celebration. The celebration of Dies Natalis Solis Invicti did not emerge in a vacuum. It coincided with an older Roman festival, Saturnalia. Saturnalia was a time of unrestrained revelry and social role reversal. It lasted for 7 days, from December 17th to 23rd. Schools and businesses were closed, and slaves were granted temporary freedom. Gambling and public intoxication were encouraged. Gifts were exchanged, and candles were lit as symbols of light. The spirit of Saturnalia influenced Dies Natalis Solis Invicti. The latter retained some lightheartedness and festivity. This merging highlights Roman religious syncretism, the blending of different beliefs into a cohesive system. The Romans were tolerant of conquered people's customs, often incorporating foreign deities and rituals. Now, let's talk about the Nimrod perspective. As we tell you this story, keep in mind about the Black Madonna, because December 25th is really about the mother line and her sons. Now, some say Nimrod is another name for Enki, or his son Murdoch, or the story is mixed up with Haru and Aset, or Isis story. We heard all that. But here's the get down. Nimrod, the grandson of Ham and great-grandson of Noah. Nimrod wasn't your average ruler. He was powerful, ambitious, and defied God, or Yahweh Elohim, who is Enlil in every way. He's the guy behind some of the first big cities in history like Babel and Nineveh. His name Nimrod even comes from a Hebrew word, meaning he rebelled in his rebellion and contempt for God. Nimrod even married his own mother. But Nimrod's story doesn't stop there. According to ancient accounts, after he died young, his mother and wife. Nimrod's mother, Semiramis' real name was Samuramat, which means high heaven. The Greeks called her Semiramis, which means the myrtled, the most renowned woman of whom we have any record. Semiramis was a skilled warrior, commander of armies, and builder of monuments. She was the only woman to rule the Assyrian Empire. Semiramis came up with a way to keep his legacy alive. She claimed that Nimrod wasn't really gone. He had become a god. Then she added a wild twist. She said an evergreen tree sprang up overnight from a dead tree stump, symbolizing Nimrod's rebirth. Semiramis told everyone that on Nimrod's birthday, December 25th, he would come back to the tree and leave gifts underneath it. People loved this story. They started throwing huge parties every year, complete with feasting and giving to celebrate Nimrod's rebirth. Over time, he became worshipped as a god, even called the divine son of heaven and the Messiah of the sun. The idea of worshiping Nimrod and his mother spread far and wide. Different cultures gave them different names. In Egypt, in Rome, and in Asia, similar stories popped up, and sun worship, which symbolized Nimrod's divinity, became a huge part of these traditions. Fast forward a few centuries, and the Roman Empire plays a big role in connecting these old customs to Christianity. The worship of Nimrod as the Messiah of the sun, who gave new life and rebirth to earth, influencing many of the pagan cultures, and this included the ancient Roman. The ancient Rome was a pagan society and had many of pagan celebrations that they enjoyed. And one of these included Saturnalia. Saturnalia was celebrated from December 17th to the 25th. This event honored Saturn, the Roman god of agriculture and harvest. As winter set in and crops stopped growing, the Romans held this festival to seek Saturn's blessing for the return of the sun and fruitful harvests. Saturnalia wasn't your typical festival. It was a week-long celebration filled with excess and chaos. Roman courts shut down and laws were temporarily lifted. People could damage property, hurt others, or indulge in all kinds of behavior without fear of punishment. It was a time of unrestrained drive. At the heart of this festival, Roman authorities selected a person, someone considered an enemy of the people, to play the role of the Lord of Misrule. This unfortunate individual was forced to indulge in food and pleasure throughout the week. But on the final day, December 25th, they were brutally killed as a symbolic act to banish darkness. Saturn himself was symbolized by a sickle representing his role in agriculture. He was often depicted as an old man with a long silver beard, riding a chariot pulled by dragons. This imagery might remind you of someone else associated with Christmas, Santa Claus. When the Romans started converting to Christianity, they didn't want to give up their favorite celebrations. So they rebranded them December 25th, which had been the date of their festival for Sol. The sun god was now celebrated as the birth of Jesus Christ. They later attributed figures like Santa Claus to St. Nicholas, who was a Roman bishop that had gifted people during his time. But this might just have been a nice cover-up on the original figure. Behind these celebrations, the legend of Santa Claus also intertwines with Norse mythology in Germanic pagan traditions. Odin, the leader of the wild hunt, was celebrated during Ule, a festival similar to Christmas every winter. Odin rode his 8-legged horse, Slip, near across them skies. covering vast distances quickly, much like Santa's sleigh, and reindeer children would leave their boots near the chimney filled with trees like carrots and straw for sneer. In return, Odin rewarded the children's kindness by leaving gifts and sweets in their boots. But Odin's journey was not an innocent one. He was said to lead the wild hunt, a ghostly procession that roamed the skies during the Ula season. This hunt was a terrifying event. According to the tales, anyone who saw it would be cursed or even snatched away by the spirits in Odin's retinue. Sound familiar? These traditions had nothing to do with the real Yeshua or his birth, but were instead rooted in so-called pagan beliefs. Even its ornaments and decorations, the Christmas tree with its evergreen branches symbolizing eternal life, may have echoes of these ancient traditions, and heavily tied to Nimrod. During Saturnalia, Romans also decorated trees. These trees, often adorned with symbols of the gods, were in a way to honor Saturn and invite blessings for the return of the sun. And what about the mistletoe? This plant held special significance during Saturnalia and other pagan celebrations. Romans believed mistletoes had magical properties. It symbolized fertility and protection. It was often hung in doorways or over altars during feasts to bring good fortune. The custom of kissing under the mistletoe comes from these fertility rituals. Though its roots are anything but romantic by today's standards on the surface, it might seem like no big deal. But here's the question. Does slapping a new label on something really change what it is? If you paint a leopard spots, it's still a leopard, right? The early Christian church never celebrated December 25th as Jesus' birthday. In fact, for centuries, there was no celebration of his birth at all. But this began to change after the Roman Emperor Constantine converted to Catholicism. Constantine's conversion brought a flood of pagans into the church, many of whom were attached to their traditional celebrations like Saturnalia to make Christianity more appealing to these converts. Church leaders allowed them to maintain their festivities. The solution, they declared December 25th to be the birth of Jesus, replacing the Roman celebration of Sol Invictus. The invincible sun with the Christian label in practice, however, little changed. The drinking, feasting, and dry continued now under the guise of honoring Christ. This change wasn't embraced by all. Many early Christians recognized the pagan roots of these customs and rejected them outright. They saw them as incompatible with true worship of God. The Bible itself speaks against such practices. In Jeremiah 10 verse 1-5, the prophet warns, "Hear the word which the Lord speaks to you, O house of Israel. Thus says the Lord, do not learn the way of the Gentiles. Do not be dismayed at the signs of heaven. For the Gentiles are dismayed at them. For the customs of the peoples are futile. For one cuts a tree from the forest, the work of the hands of the workman with the axe. They decorate it with silver and gold. They fasten it with nails and hammers, so that it will not topple. They are upright like a palm tree, and they cannot speak. They must be tearing married because they cannot go by themselves. Do not be afraid of them, for they cannot do evil, nor can they do any good." These customs went new. They dated back even before the birth of Christ to ancient so-called pagan worship practices. When the Roman Church introduced these celebrations, many Christians resisted recognizing their origins. But over the centuries, these pagan elements were rebranded and eventually accepted by the 20th century companies like Coca-Cola, solidified modern Christmas traditions with advertisements featuring the jolly Santa Claus, turning the holiday into a global phenomenon. Now, some might argue, why does it matter if we celebrate Christmas as long as we're worshiping Christ? But here's the thing. Jesus never asked us to celebrate his birth. In fact, the Bible gives no command to honor his birth as a holy day. And keep in mind, this part is for my Bible guys. What we do know is that Yeshua was very intentional about what he wanted us to remember about his death and sacrifice symbolized in the Last Supper, when he instituted the practice of communion. The Bible also warns us against adopting pagan practices and blending them into the worship of God. In Deuteronomy 12:29-32, it says, "When the Lord your God cuts off before you the nations whom you go in to dispossess, and you dispossess them and dwell in their land, take heed that ye be not ensnared to follow them after they have been destroyed before you, and that you do not inquire about their gods, saying, how did these nations serve their gods? That I also may do the same. You shall not worship the Lord your God in that way, for every abominable thing that the Lord hates, they have done for their gods, for they even burn their sons and their daughters in the fire to their gods. Everything that I command you shall be careful to do. You shall not add to it or take from it." God's instructions are clear. He warns against mixing true worship with practices rooted in paganism. Even the argument that the shepherds brought gifts to Jesus at his birth doesn't justify turning his birth into an annual celebration. Their gifts were an acknowledgement of Christ's kingship, not a mandate for an ongoing festival. Moreover, historical and cultural evidence makes it highly unlikely that Jesus was born on December 25th. December in Judea is cold and rainy, not a time when shepherds would be out in the fields at night. The Bible cautions us in Colossians 2:8, "See to it that no one takes you captive by philosophy and empty deceit, according to human tradition, according to the elemental spirits of the world, and not according to Christ." When we mix human traditions with the worship of God, we risk turning what should be sacred into something profane. Christmas, with its pagan roots and modern commercialization, becomes less about Christ and more about human tradition. As believers, we are called to worship God in spirit and truth, not through practices he never ordained. What about the spirit behind Christmas? At first glance, Christmas appears to be about joy, generosity, and celebration. But when we dig deeper, we see that the behaviors associated with the season, excessive drinking, gluttony, crime, and even an increase in violence, don't reflect a Christian spirit. Instead, they mirror the debauchery and chaos of Saturnalia, the pagan festival from which many Christmas traditions originate. What then is the spirit of Christmas? It is earthly, indulgent, and far from holy. James 3:15 describes such a spirit as earthly, unspirited, spiritual, and demonic. This spirit, originating in pagan worship, has intoxicated the world under the guise of Christianity. Is a counterfeit spirit, a tool of the devil to distract people from true worship. Sometimes things sound good or even look good, but that doesn't make them right. Proverbs 14:12 warns us, "There is a way that seems right to a man, but its end is the way of death." Many people, while seemingly religious during the Christmas season, go through the motions, attending church, offering prayers and singing carols, but their hearts remain far from God. As Jesus himself said in Matthew 1:58-9, "This people honors me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me in vain. Do they worship me, teaching as doctrines the commandments of men, the decorations and festivities, often glorify paganism, which is inherently tied to demonism, associating God's name and work with these customs desecrates his name. One of the 10 commandments explicitly warns us, you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain. His truth about Christmas may not be an easy one to learn, especially about a holiday so beloved and ingrained in our culture, but it's a necessary truth if we are to worship God in spirit and in truth. Understanding the origins and meanings of these traditions allows us to decide whether they truly honor God or not. Now that you've seen this perspective, how do you feel about it? Will you stop celebrating a holiday rooted in pagan practices? Or if you choose to continue, share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear your perspective. From my perspective, there is good energy behind it for the children. I loved Christmas as a child. Giving and love is good for the soul. I think the trees, lights, and the decorations are maybe ritualistic, but we already had gift day for thousands of years before all this in ancient Kemet for the children. The real Jesus, Yeshua, was born in June, not on December the 25th. There are 3 different people that have been known as Jesus. There was no J in the language when Jesus was born. Did you know Santa really is an anagram for Satan? The character of Santa Claus is based on the folklore of St. Nicholas, a 4th century Christian bishop and patron saint of children. St. Nicholas was known for his generosity and secret gift giving. I once heard a preacher get down on jolly old St. Nick. You know, ho, ho, hoax. He was inveighing against America's icon of midwinter materialism, calling him a fat pagan elf who had no place in a Christian celebration of the birth of Jesus Christ. He was serious when he pointed out that the very name Santa is an anagram of Satan. St. Nicholas was famous for his generosity to those in need, his love for children, and his concern for sailors and ships. He died December 6, AD 343, in the Turkish city of Myra, and was buried in the cathedral church. Because he died on December 6th, the early Christians chose that day to remember Nicholas. And because his day was close to Christmas, the celebrations in his memory were eventually blended with Christmas festivities. Among other things, St. Nicholas became the patron saint of seafarers. The first European Moors to arrive in the New World were Catholics. You know the Black Conquistadors. Black Conquistadors were people of African or Afro-Hispanic Moorish descent who fought alongside the Spanish against indigenous warriors in the Americas. They played a key role in the exploration and conquest of the Americas, and many used military service to gain the freedom and inclusion in Spanish society. 2 well-known Black conquistadors are Juan Garrido and Juan Valiente. They shared similar journeys to how they got to where they were. Garrido and Valiente, like other African Moors during this time, were born in West Africa, where they were later enslaved. So they sailed with St. Nicholas, the devil, as their patron. It's not surprising, therefore, to learn that on his first voyage, Christopher Columbus named a Haitian port after St. Nicholas on December 6, 1492. And in Florida, the town now named Jacksonville was first called St. Nicholas Ferry by the Spanish explorers. Santa is a fat dude who is a Darrow extraterrestrial from the North Pole cave system. He is wearing red, one of the lowest vibrational colors, which represents the lower chakras, which is the roots chakras. which deals with gluttony, which is overeating, which is why he's obese. It deals with negative emotions like fear, insecurity, anxiety, lack of trust, feeling ungrounded, and a sense of instability, often stemming from issues related to basic survival needs like physical safety, financial security, and a sense of belonging. There is no way this fat dude is going to make it down a chimney, which deals with fire worship. The number 666 is associated with the devil, the Antichrist, or evil in general. It's also known as the number of the beast and is mentioned in the book of Revelation in the Bible. From a higher perspective, 666 is sometimes associated with carbon because carbon has an atomic number of 6, meaning a carbon atom has 6 protons, 6 electrons, and 6 neutrons, essentially making 6666 a representation of the number of subatomic particles in a carbon atom. However, this interpretation is not widely used in, but is connected to the esoteric math system. The first major form of modern religious Satanism was the Church of Satan, founded in San Francisco by Anton LaVey on April 30th, 1966, and it was sanctioned by Ronald Wilson Reagan. LaVey also promoted his ideas through books, most notably the Satanic Bible, 1969. All this goes back to Santa, which is Satan. Like we said, the Romans celebrated their own midwinter festival, Saturnalia. This was a grand event dedicated to Saturn, the god of agriculture. It marked the end of the harvest and the beginning of winter rest. But Saturnalia was no quiet religious observance. It was a full-blown carnival during Saturnalia. Social norms were flipped upside down. Masters and slaves traded places, and the streets were filled with laughter, singing, and celebration. Homes were decorated with greenery. People feasted until they couldn't eat another bite. And yes, they even gave gifts, just like we do today. Many of the decorations we associate with Christmas holly, mistletoe, and wreaths come from these ancient traditions. They symbolize life and fertility during the bleakest time of year. But there's more to the story in both the northern Ula and the Roman Saturnalia. These festivals weren't just about survival. They were about letting loose, breaking free from the rules of daily life. And sometimes this freedom went too far. These celebrations could get wild. It was a time to indulge in food, drink, and other behaviors that wouldn't be considered appropriate. The rest of the year, some of this still survives. Today, ever heard of kissing under the mistletoe? That's an echo of these ancient fertility customs. As Christianity spread, these celebrations didn't disappear. Instead, they were transformed. The church had a choice: reject these beloved traditions or give them a new meaning. What happened next would change the course of history and the way we celebrate Christmas forever. The decorations we use today also have roots in these pagan festivals. Evergreens like holly and mistletoe were symbols of life and fertility, to especially carried a sacred meaning. It was believed to have magical properties, bringing health, protection, and blessings over time. It became a symbol of love and romance. So the next time you see mistletoes at a holiday party, remember, it's more than just a fun excuse to steal a kiss. It's a tradition that goes all the way back to these ancient festivals, where fertility and renewal were at the heart of the celebration. Then there was the feasting. People ate and drank more than they would all year. Imagine a table overflowing with roasted meats, freshly baked bread, and mugs of spiced wine. This was the ultimate indulgence, a time to eat, drink, and be merry without worrying about tomorrow. Sound familiar? Today, we carry on this tradition with Christmas feasts, the turkey, the desserts, and even the over-the-top portions, all harken back to these ancient festivals. But in those days, it wasn't just about joy. It was about survival. People needed to believe that abundance was possible even in the darkest of times. Unfortunately, with all this indulgence came excess. The rules of daily life were gone, and people let their impulses take over. Gambling was common, drinking was excessive, and self-control was forgotten. These festivals often turned into what we might call today a free-for-all. And yes, some of this still survives. Think of holiday office parties, where people drink too much, or the push to buy, spend, and indulge during the Christmas season. These echoes of Ule and Saturnalia are all around us, even if we don't realize it. One particularly wild tradition was the election of a Lord of Misrule. This person was in charge of the chaos, encouraging everyone to let go of their inhibitions for 12 days. The duration of these festivals, the Lord of Misrule could do as he pleased. This idea of a topsy-turvy world is the root of the 12 days of Christmas. But for early Christians, these wild festivals were a serious problem. How could they celebrate Christ while people around them indulged in such pagan customs? They had a choice: reject these traditions or find a way to redeem them. What happened next would forever change. In the early centuries, most Christians refused to celebrate these festivals. They saw them as pagan, indulgent, and completely opposed to the teachings of Christ after all. How could a celebration filled with drunkenness, gambling, and wild behavior possibly honor God? Take, for example, the story of Pope Gregory. In the 4th century, he sent a missionary named Augustine. Augustine was tasked with converting the local people to Christianity. But when he arrived, he quickly realized the challenge ahead of him. The people were deeply attached to their midwinter festivals, and no amount of preaching could convince them to give them up. In his letter, Augustine explained that these festivals were too important to the people. No matter how much he preached, they wouldn't stop celebrating. He asked Pope Gregory for advice. Should he keep trying to persuade them to abandon these traditions, or was there another way? Pope Gregory's response was both strategic and controversial. He essentially said, if you can't beat them, join them. Rather than trying to stop these festivals, Gregory suggested transforming them. Instead of celebrating the rebirth of the sun, the people could celebrate the birth of the Son of God. And so December 25th was chosen as the official date to celebrate Jesus' birth. The reasoning was simple. It was close to the winter solstice, when the pagan festivals were already in full swing. By giving people a Christian reason to celebrate the church, hope to gradually replace the old traditions with new ones focused on Christ. But there's one question that often comes up. Was Jesus actually born on December 25th? The Bible gives us clues that suggest otherwise. For example, the Gospel of Luke tells us that shepherds were out in the fields watching their flocks at night in Israel. This would have been unlikely. In December, it was too cold, and there was often snow on the hills. Most people agreed that Jesus was likely born in the spring or fall, when the weather was mild and shepherds could stay out in the fields. So why December 25th? The date wasn't chosen because it was historically accurate. It was chosen because it fit the church's mission to reach the people where they were. This decision was practical, but it wasn't without controversy. Some early Christians believed it was wrong to mix pagan traditions with the worship of Christ. They feared it would dilute the true message of the gospel, and even today, some Christians feel uneasy about the pagan roots of Christmas. But for the church leaders of the time, the goal was clear. Bring people closer to Christ by assigning a Christian meaning to these celebrations. They hope to gradually shift the focus away from indulgence and toward worship. This blending of tradition wasn't immediate. It took centuries. At first, many of the old custom continued. The ulalog, the evergreens, and even the feasting remained part of the celebration. But slowly these symbols were given new meanings. The ulalog came to represent Christ as the light of the world. Evergreen symbolized eternal life through Jesus. And the 12 days of feasting became associated with the journey of the Magi. The church also introduced new traditions to focus on Christ. The nativity scene, for example, became a way to teach people about Jesus' humble birth. Hymns and carols were written to replace pagan songs over time. These new customs began to take root, and the old pagan meanings faded into the background. But the process wasn't always smooth for centuries. Christmas remained a mix of pagan and Christian elements. Some people fully embraced the Christian meaning, while others continued to hold on to the old ways. This tension between the sacred and the secular is something we still see today. So, what does all this mean for us? Can we celebrate Christmas with its pagan roots? And how can we honor the true meaning of Christ's birth in a season so full of distractions? To answer these questions, we need to take a closer look at the journey of Christmas through the centuries and how it became the holiday we know today. In the 4th century, Pope Julius officially declared December 25th as the date for Christ's birth. This wasn't based on biblical evidence, but on a clever calculation. By aligning the celebration of Christ's birth with the already popular winter festivals, the church could introduce a Christian narrative without demanding people abandon their cherished traditions all at once. But the date carried more meaning than just convenience. December 25th was also linked to the Roman festival of Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun, which celebrated the return of longer days after the winter solstice. For Christians, this symbolism wasn't lost. They reinterpreted it as a celebration of the Son of God, the true light of the world. Over time, December 25th became more than just a date. It became a powerful symbol. In choosing this day, the church sent a message. Christ's birth represents the light that overcomes darkness, the hope that dispels despair. It was a perfect parallel to the solstice festivals people already celebrated. But the decision to merge these traditions didn't come without conflict. Not everyone agreed with this approach. Some devout Christians believed it was wrong to incorporate pagan elements into the worship of Christ. They argued that the focus should remain solely on biblical teachings, untainted by worldly influences. Throughout history, there were those who rejected Christmas altogether. For example, certain Christian groups in the Middle AS avoided the celebration, seeing it as too closely tied to pagan customs. Even centuries later, during the Reformation, the Puritans in England and America tried to ban Christmas entirely. To the Puritans, Christmas was nothing more than an excuse for indulgence, drinking, and debauchery. They viewed it as a distraction from the true purpose of faith for them. The idea of celebrating Christ's birth on December 25th, a date with pagan origins, was unacceptable. This debate over what's sacred and what's secular continues even today. How much of Christmas is about Christ? How much of it is cultural? These questions aren't new. They've been asked for centuries. But despite the debates, the church's choice of December 25th had a lasting impact. By assigning this day to Christ's birth, they planted a seed, a new narrative that would grow and evolve over time. It allowed the focus to shift from pagan gods to the God who, according to Christian belief, became flesh and dwelt among us.